So the biggest change that we saw, and I'd be so curious to know if it happened internationally, but in the U.S., we're a very region-based compensation culture. Because if I live in New York, I can easily pay $5,000 a month for rent and consider that to be a pretty good deal. And daily life is anywhere between $30 to $40 between communication, bus, food. I can move 4 hours away to either down to Virginia or up to New Hampshire and pay something like $1,100 for a four-bedroom house, and spend between $1 to $5 a day on food and transportation. So what we were seeing for the first time, before I say that, as a result, living in larger cities always commands a much higher salary. We use calculations like local cost of living as well as local cost of labor. So what we were seeing for the very first time, especially in the pandemic, where people were like, "Hey, let me take my $250,000 a year salary from New York City, let me move to Des Moines, Iowa, buy a house for the first time ever, because I never thought homeownership would be a thing I could do. And it's $9 and a bag of jelly beans to buy a house down here. Let me buy this house and feed my kids, and oh my God, I have a savings account now and I can pay my bills." The problem was, once you leave a location, a company is required now to adjust your location because you're no longer part of that high cost of living state. So this, I felt so bad because people are like, "Oh my God, I could buy a house, I could pay off my debt." Like, they felt financial freedom for the first time, but then companies were saying, "No, well, you can't be making $250,000 if you're listed in Des Moines, Iowa." So then all these people started making all these angry comments. Location-based salary is a fraud, or you're just trying to save money. Where it's, from my side as the business side, I get exactly why we're doing it. If you're not part of New York City anymore, you should not be entitled to that premium, because it's like you got a salary increase where the rest of your team didn't. So that is an ongoing issue that we have with a lot of companies playing around with the idea of national averages versus location-based averages, which seems to work in areas outside of the major metro cities, but most companies are still doing some sort of hybrid between the two. I'd be curious, is that the same? Do you guys have you experienced that?
Yeah, I think it's quite similar, especially in South Africa. What we saw was a lot of semi-gration, so people moving out to more rural or coastal towns that were cheaper. What Cape Town's not cheaper than Johannesburg, but they pay less in Cape Town compared to Johannesburg. But it's about that quality of life aspect. I think what also makes a difference though is that we tax nationally, so it's the same tax rates as opposed to like state tax. I think that's a very
Big one.
confusing thing for people that are not Americans, of how that impacts you. And when you hear like, oh, there's no income tax in, I don't know, Miami or Florida or in Texas or whatever, it's very interesting to see like how that impacts people's decision makings of where they want to live and work. But yeah, similar in South Africa. A lot of people moving to the Western Cape, Cape Town in particular, because of the improved quality of life and service delivery. But then that call to come back to the office has really frustrated a lot of people, I think.
I can imagine.
I think that's really interesting. And that kind of begs the question as well about hybrid, doesn't it? Because you could still be in New York, but not traveling in 3 days a week, but still be within that compensation. What was it called? The location rating.
Oh, location-based pay? Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
so for like for premium city, for New York City, like there's a very standard thing that all New Yorkers know, which is when you're in your 20s and you go and live in New York and you live life like pretending to be part of Friends, and then you realize it's miserable because there's rats on the subway and it's $9,000 per day to live there. And then you meet someone and you start a family and you're like, well, we obviously are, we don't have a Rochester money. We can't actually buy a house here. So you buy a house in New Jersey, because New Jersey is a different state. Like New York, like to your point, Billie Jean, like New York City is so horrible because you have to pay federal income tax and you pay state income tax, but then you also have to pay New York City tax. So you get taxed 3 times if you work in New York City. So what people all will all do is, generally once you're in your early 30s to late 30s, you buy a house in New Jersey and you're like, oh wait, this is what living is actually like. I can buy a house and I have a front yard and I don't see rats every day. And in 45 minutes, I could get to my high paying New York City job.